Germany's Interior Minister Dobrindt said his country was the daily target of hybrid attacks during the inauguration of a new drone security research center. At least 10 people have been killed by a Russian rocket which struck a village in the northern eastern region of Kharkiv.
As a ship was hit by a projectile, Iran's top negotiator said the Strait of Hormuz would not open until the US lifted its naval blockade.
Opening statements and witness testimonies have begun in hip-hop icon Tupac Shakur's murder trial, almost 30 years after the rapper's killing.
Sophie Adno is said to become the first French woman to go on a spacewalk. While another ship has been hit by a projectile in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's top negotiator said the waterway would not open until the US lifted its naval blockade and released frozen Iranian assets.
و روشن بگویم تا زمانی که تعهدات آمریکا در تفاهمنامه از جمله رفع محاصره، آزادی اموال بلوکه شده، رفع تحریم نفت، پایان تهدید و عملیات نظامی در همه جبهه‌ها و دیگر شروطی که در تفاهمنامه آمریکا با آن متحد شده است اجرایی نشود، تنگه باز نخواهد شد.
Meanwhile, an unidentified projectile damaged the engine room of a ship and resulted in a crew casualty early Tuesday morning as the vessel was trying to transit the Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Oman. It was not immediately clear whether the crew member was killed in the attack or wounded. With negotiations between the US and Iran stalled, Tehran has been holding separate talks with Oman on a plan to manage ships transiting the strait. Tehran said Monday it was finalizing details for a joint statement. US President Donald Trump reacted angrily, reportedly saying the US would bomb Oman if it gets in the way.
At least 10 people have been killed in a Russian strike in northeast Ukraine as Moscow launched 147 drones overnight over its neighbor. A Russian rocket which struck the village of Peshenigi in the northeast region of Kharkiv has left 10 people dead and 8 injured, according to the local governor on Tuesday, who added that the strike hit homes and shops. The death toll of 437 Ukrainian civilians in July was 70% higher than the same month in 2025, according to the United Nations. On Tuesday afternoon, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiga and his Belgian counterpart Maxime Prévost held talks in an underground shelter after an air raid alert forced them to evacuate. Meanwhile, a total of 620 drones flew towards the Moscow region overnight, with the worst damage done in the Pavlovsky Posad district, Russian officials said on Tuesday, who also reported that several people were wounded and buildings were hit. Ukraine's defense forces also struck a number of Russian military facilities, including an ammunition depot and ground control stations, Ukraine's armed forces reported. Germany has opened a new drone security research center in Saxony-Anhalt as the country steps up efforts to protect airports and critical infrastructure from hostile and unauthorized aircraft. During its inauguration, Germany's Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt said his country was the daily target of hybrid attacks and explained why, in his opinion, Germany was being targeted.
Ein zentraler Baustein mitten in Europa sind, wenn es wirtschaftliche Stabilität geht, wenn es politische Stabilität geht, wenn es gesellschaftliche Stabilität geht, wenn es sicherheitspolitische Stabilität in Europa.
Dobrindt also described the threat posed by drones as part of the shadow war of the 21st century. The facility will research and test technology designed to detect and counter unauthorized drones around airports, major events and critical infrastructure. Germany has recently been subjected to multiple incidents, including an explosives-laden drone at Leipzig airport. While shortly afterwards, operations at Hanover airport were disrupted after a drone entered restricted airspace.
Opening statements and witness testimonies have begun in a long-awaited trial almost 30 years after hip-hop icon Tupac Shakur was killed in 1996. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, a self-described gangster, is being accused of plotting the fatal murder in a case built against him via his own testimonies, police corroborations, and from a memoir released in 2019. He had reportedly sought to retaliate against Shakur after the artist's entourage attacked his nephew in Las Vegas just hours before the shooting.
Dwayne Davis did not pull the trigger. But what he did do was plan the retaliation for the beating of his nephew. Dwayne Davis made sure that the shooters were armed and ready to execute their revenge. And remarkably, you will learn that from Dwayne Davis himself.
Davis's defense argued that for almost 30 years until his 2023 indictment, there were no charges in this case due to a lack of evidence, moving to slam the prosecution's claims as fiction.
And at the end of all the time we spent together, what you're going to find is that the state cannot prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt the claim that Keefe had anything to do with a first-degree murder with use of deadly weapon. There's no facts to that matter.
Davis's attorney is presenting a defense strategy painting his own client as a liar, essentially withdrawing all previous testimony he made linking himself to Tupac's killing.
Yeah, you're essentially telling the jury that your client is a liar.
Yep, I am. Yes, that's true.
Tupac Shakur was the victim of a drive-by shooting outside the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas on 7 September 1996, where he sustained critical gunshot wounds before succumbing to his injuries a week later. Davis is the only living member of the four-person entourage believed to have carried out the shooting from a white Cadillac vehicle.
Orlando, Baby Lane.
At this restaurant located in the city of São Paulo, attention to detail and the quality of the dishes served are paramount. In addition, Toujours, a venue known for its award-winning cuisine, also strives to respect the seasonality of ingredients and adapt to the different seasons of the year, particularly the rainfall patterns, which are becoming increasingly erratic in São Paulo due to global warming.
A gente tem época do ano aqui em São Paulo que chove todos os dias, como você falou. Isso vai te dar alguns ingredientes, né? Você tem épocas intermediárias, como a que a gente tá, e de repente você tem uma época do ano em São Paulo que fica 60 dias sem chover. E cada uma dessas características te proporciona produtos e possibilidades diferentes.
The restaurant is run by chef Ivan Ralston and his partner, culinary researcher Katerina Cordas. Research and exploration, combined with innovation and adaptation, give rise to the dishes served here. The tasting menus change every 3 months.
Normalmente, mês de julho, agosto é seco. E ainda não está seco, né? Tem chovido assim às vezes, né? Isso tem a ver com o Super Anil. Isso fez com que a gente tivesse uma temporada de cogumelos maior. Durou quase o dobro do tempo. Então, você tem que sempre ficar esperto e se adaptar. Afinal de contas, não é uma coisa engessada que vai ser assim para sempre.
This year, Toujours received its third Michelin star, along with another restaurant in the city, making these two establishments the first in Latin America to earn these top culinary distinctions.
Uma celebração é um restaurante de celebração, né? Não é um restaurante para você vir todo dia comer e ir para casa. É uma coisa, um momento especial.
This award-winning dining experience is not, however, within everyone's reach. Reservations must be made weeks in advance, and the price of the set menus can run as high as €277.
Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema won re-election with around 60% of votes cast last week, the Electoral Commission announced on Tuesday, after a race critics said was tightly managed by his government. Hichilema, who has been in power since 2021, faced a crowded field of 13 challengers led by former provincial minister Brian Mundubile, making his first bid for the presidency. According to the Electoral Commission, Mundubile, who entered the race in May, secured nearly 38% of the vote. The commission, however, said 5 of the 226 constituencies had not been tallied and the outstanding results, quote, are not likely to materially influence the overall result of that election. Zambia's 13 August election was widely seen as a referendum on Ichilema's first term. It was, however, overshadowed by opposition allegations of fraud and an unprecedented nationwide suspension of vote tallying a day after polling, following attacks on election staff and the theft of marked ballot papers. The suspension was later lifted the same day. The EU observation mission warned at the weekend that restrictions on the opposition in the campaigning period may have contributed to an, quote, uneven contest.
First through the hatches, ESA astronaut. First through the hatches,
Sophie Adno is writing a new page in French astronomy 6 months after joining the International Space Station. The aeronautical engineer made her first spacewalk this Tuesday. Adno became the second European woman and the first French woman to carry out such a mission. The journey is carried alongside with the American Anil Menon. The operation began around 2:30 p.m. French time and was scheduled to last no less than 6 hours and a half. The objective is to replace the space-to-ground antenna, which is essential for high-start data transmissions and communications between the ISS and ground control centers. To do so, Sophie Adno carries in her diving suit a liter of water and oxygen, enough to last about 10 hours in space.
External engineering camera on the Soyuz spacecraft looking at the International Space Station.